Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today is December 24th, 2025. And while you might think the world is slowing down for the holidays, the AI industry is doing anything but.
That's right. Today is all about massive infrastructure deals, some really critical research breakthroughs, and big shifts in how governments are starting to manage AI.
So we've sifted through a mountain of sources, all published today, and a few clear trends have emerged.
Absolutely. We're going to break down three things for you. First, this hardware arms race for what are called inference chips. Second, some fascinating advances in making AI models more reliable and efficient. And third, the big regulatory push for transparency that's coming out of both Europe and Asia.
Okay, let's jump right in with Segment A research and foundational models. And we have to start with this big news out of China from ByteDance.
Yes, this is their Seed Prover 1.5 model. What's so interesting here is that it's generating verifiable proof code for formal mathematics. So we're not just talking about getting a numerical answer.
You mean it's actually proving logically that the answer is true?
Exactly. It's tackling these incredibly complex symbolic logic problems. And the metric here, this is what's really stunning.
It scored 35 out of 42 points on the International Mathematical Olympiad proof code.
Right. And for anyone who follows this, that score is basically the threshold for a human to win a gold medal at the IMO.
So we're talking about an AI that can compete with the most brilliant young mathematicians on the planet.
We are. It's a huge milestone. This kind of multi-step logical reasoning is what you need for things like bug-free software or, critical infrastructure management. And for any researchers listening, ByteDance did announce they're opening up API access to this.
That's a great resource. Okay, so if that's the frontier of accuracy, what are the frontier of cost? Because these models are famously expensive to build.
Well, that's our next piece of research. It's all about how to make models cheaper to train, which is, it's critical if you want anyone other than the tech giants to be able to innovate.
So this is about something called distillation.
Precisely. Transferring the reasoning ability from a huge model to a smaller one. And they found a technique using what's called sequence truncation that provides this massive computational shortcut.
Okay, so break that down. What does that mean in simple terms?
Imagine you're training a model on a textbook. This research shows that if you only make the model read the first half of every paragraph, so just 50% of the tokens.
Only half the data.
Right. It still retains about 94% of the performance. You can cut your training costs almost in half without really sacrificing the quality of the model.
That is a game changer.
Yeah.
It really democratizes access to this level of tech.
It does. Now, on the generative side, for things like image creation, there's another efficiency trick that came out today. It's a proposal for what's called Gaussianization preprocessing.
Sounds complicated.
The name is, but the idea is simple. It's about organizing your data before you feed it to the diffusion model. You sort of pre-sort the chaos.
Like tidying up a library before you ask the librarian to find a book.
That's a perfect analogy. You make the data distribution easier for the model to understand. And the result is better image quality and more stability, especially for smaller models, the kind you'd run on your phone.
Which brings us nicely from the lab to the real world. Let's talk about applied AI, because this is where you start to see the friction with society and, frankly, with user trust.
And we have a great example of that from Japan. It's an agentic explainable AI framework, or XAI. They tested it on an agricultural recommendation system.
So this is AI telling farmers what to do.
Right, but instead of just spitting out an answer, it uses multimodal LLMs to refine the explanation with a human expert. It's a collaboration.
So it's a conversation. The expert can push back and ask for clarity.
Exactly, and the result was that human experts confirmed the recommendation quality went up by 30 to 33% compared to just a static single answer. That's how you build trust in a specialized field.
But that trust is being challenged elsewhere. We saw a really interesting study from Cornell about how LLMs are changing scientific publishing.
This one is, it's a bit of a paradox. On one hand, researchers using LLMs are way more productive. They're posting 33 to 50% more papers.
That sounds great.
It does. But here's the catch. The papers that had that very polished AI-generated writing style were actually less likely to be accepted by journals.
So the polish is backfiring.
It seems to be. It's creating this style inflation where it's becoming a false signal of quality. And now peer reviewers are having to figure out what's real substance versus what's this, high-gloss AI rating.
And speaking of what's real inside of large organizations, there was an autoethnography. Basically, a researcher's self-study on the invisible labor of making AI work.
This is fascinating. It found that in higher education, non-technical staff are constantly creating their own shadow systems. Basically, workarounds to make the official enterprise LLMs do what they need them to do.
Why? What's wrong with the official systems?
They're often too clunky, too restrictive, or just limited by internal politics. So the staff build their own solutions to get the job done.
But doesn't that create a huge security risk?
It absolutely does. That's the double-edged sword. This invisible labor is what makes the AI adoption successful. But it's happening outside the official monitored channels. The big takeaway for any leader is that you have to find a way to embrace this human ingenuity, not suppress it.
That focus on real-world systems is a perfect segue into Segment B, product launches, where AI is getting baked into things we use every day, starting with our cars.
Yes, Waymo is testing Google Gemini as an in-car assistant in its robotaxis. We know this from a leaked system prompt found in their apps code.
And the key thing here isn't just that you can ask the car to play music, it's the guardrails they're building in.
That's exactly it. The prompt explicitly tells Gemini to never speculate about driving events. It's forbidden from getting defensive about an incident. The AI assistant's identity is walled off from the core self-driving system, which they call the Waymo driver.
So the chatbot can't speak for the car's driving decisions.
Never. And that's a critical precedent for liability and for passenger trust. They're drawing a very clear line.
Meanwhile, in China, SenseTime just launched version 4.3 of its SenseCore AI suite, which is aimed at smart cities.
Right. This is all about enhancing video analytics for things like managing traffic and predicting crowd flow in big urban areas.
And they put it a pretty impressive metric. The system claims 98.7% accuracy for detecting vehicles at night.
Which is key. That kind of high reliability, especially in difficult conditions, is what you need to meet public safety standards.
And rounding out the product news, Samsung is making a big play in AI for home appliances.
They are. They announced they'll be showing off new bespoke AI appliances at the next CES. And their whole marketing pitch is about moving AI from communication to understanding.
What does it actually mean?
It means moving from you telling your fridge what to do to your fridge proactively telling you what you need. It's about on-device intelligence that can predict when you're low on milk, optimize energy use based on electricity prices, or even schedule its own maintenance.
In a global home appliance market worth over $600 billion, that proactive intelligence becomes a huge differentiator.
It's the new standard.
All right, let's shift gears to Segment C chips, infrastructure, and the money behind all this. And today, we have one of the biggest deals of the year.
This is the one that's shaking up the market. Nvidia has struck a deal to license technology from the AI chip startup Groq. They're also hiring key engineers, including the founder.
And the reported price tag is staggering. CNBC is reporting the deal is worth approximately $20 billion in cash.
$20 billion! And for anyone listening, here's why you should care. Nvidia is dominant in GPUs, which are great for training models.
Right.
But Groq pioneered something called an LPU, a language processing unit, which is hyper-optimized for inference, for actually running the model and getting a response. It's incredibly fast and efficient for that specific task.
So by licensing this tech, Nvidia is defending its turf and locking down the future of fast, cheap inference.
They're shoring up a potential weakness and boxing out competitors. It's a major strategic move.
And it's happening as the spending on this infrastructure is just exploding. ByteDance just outlined a plan for 2026.
A massive plan. They're budgeting $160 billion, which is about $23 billion, for 2026 capital expenditures. About half of that is earmarked for advanced AI chips.
What's driving that kind of spending?
Their user base. Their Dubao AI chatbot has 155 million weekly active users. The sheer scale of that service demands a colossal investment in hardware. It's a pure infrastructure arms race.
And it's not just the chipmakers like Nvidia who are benefiting. The whole ecosystem is booming.
That's a really important point. An analysis that came out today showed that the companies building the rest of the data center storage, networking, and especially optical interconnects, their stocks dramatically outperformed even Nvidia's this year.
There's a specific number here that jumped out at me. Lumentum, a company that makes the optical tech that connects GPUs, saw its shares jump 372% in 2025.
Exactly. It shows the value is spreading across the entire supply chain. If you think of the GPUs as the engines, these companies are building the highways between them, and those highways are becoming incredibly valuable.
All of this spending and consolidation naturally leads to the next question. Who's making the rules? Which brings us to Segment D, policy and governance.
And regulators are definitely starting to get serious. In Europe, we saw France's Data Protection Authority, the CNIL, hit a company called Next Publica with a 1.7 million fine.
And what was that for?
For failing to properly secure software that was being used by public disability services. It's a strong signal that under GDPR, if your system handles sensitive health data, the security obligations are incredibly high.
And we're seeing a similar move toward concrete rules in Asia, specifically in Singapore.
Yes. The IMDA, their media authority, just released new guidelines. They're now requiring that any generative AI used by government agencies has to be audited through their AI Verify system.
They also have to disclose where their training data came from.
Right. It's a major step. They're moving from voluntary frameworks to actual government mandates, and these rules go into effect on March 1st, 2026.
So Singapore is mandating audits, while in Europe they're focused on measuring the environmental impact.
That's a huge focus for the EU. The deadline just passed for a new project with a €3 million budget to figure out how to accurately measure the energy and hardware consumption of these models.
They want to connect the metrics we use, like tokens, to the real-world environmental cost.
Exactly. It's about accountability, and it ties directly into their AI Act and Green Deal objectives. You can't regulate what you can't measure.
And this issue of cost and waste becomes even more critical when we talk about the explosion of low-quality AI content, or AI slop.
A perfect connection. NPR just published a big year-end report on this. They document the incredible rise of this cheap, synthetic content, especially video.
And this isn't just an annoyance. It has real economic and social consequences.
It really does. It's eroding public trust. It's being used for ad fraud, and it creates what's called a liar's dividend, where it's so easy to create fakes that people start disbelieving real evidence.
And with a big election year in 2026 coming up, that's a huge problem. It makes the kind of mandates we're seeing from Singapore and the EU seem not just important, but urgent.
They're absolutely non-negotiable at this point.
Finally, we did see one incident today that highlights how fragile some of these large-scale systems can still be.
Yes, OpenAI's status page reported a service degradation. For several hours, users were having trouble loading conversation history and downloading files from their custom GPTs.
And the specific things that broke history and files are significant.
They are, because they point to fragility in the state and memory parts of the infrastructure. For anyone building a business process on top of these agents, that memory component is just as critical as the AI's intelligence. If it can't remember the last step, it's useless.
So let's wrap all this up. What a day for December 24th. We saw this huge hardware consolidation with the Nvidia and Groq deal in the US.
Which is being met by massive competitive spending from companies like ByteDance in China. At the same time, regulators in Singapore and the EU are shifting from suggestions to hard mandates on transparency and auditing.
It really feels like the bottleneck is moving away from can the AI do the thing to can we do it efficiently, reliably, and safely.
I think that's exactly right. The research into mathematical proofs and reasoning distillation is tackling those core problems of reliability and cost head-on.
Before we sign off, let's highlight a couple of tools from today's sources that you can actually use.
Okay, first, for any researchers out there, ByteDance is opening up API access to that Seed Prover 1.5 model.
Right.
If you're working on anything that needs high-integrity, verifiable logic, that's a platform you should check out.
And second, for developers.
Yeah.
That Gaussianization preprocessing technique we talked about offers a real algorithmic shortcut. It's a way to improve the quality of generative models, especially if you're working with smaller, cheaper hardware.
Two great takeaways.
And finally, our numbers of the day.
First up, $20 billion. That's the reported price tag on the Nvidia deal to license Groq's technology and hire their talent, a move to corner the market on high-speed inference.
And numbers here. $23 billion.
Yeah.
The massive 2026 infrastructure budget that ByteDance has drafted, showing just how intense the global competition for AI hardware has become.
You know, we saw in that research today how the success of enterprise AI so often depends on those unofficial workarounds, that invisible labor from humans on the ground.
The shadow systems.
The shadow systems. And as these AI models get more powerful, I think the big question isn't just about whether the tech is reliable in a lab. It's whether our organizations can learn to embrace and support that essential human hustle, or if they're just going to try and suppress it in favor of rigid technical specs that don't quite work in the real world.
The human element is still the deciding factor. A fantastic thought to end on. We'll be back next time for another deep dive into your source material.